In this tutorial, we are going to be adding the ability to log in with Apple in our app. In the last tutorial, we added the ability to log in with Google. So for this tutorial, you will need a Apple developer's account. So to sign up for that, go ahead and go to developer.apple.com. If you don't already have one, sign up and then come back to the tutorial. The next thing we're going to do, we'll set up our Apple identifier. Then we'll configure and download a key that we'll be using in our app. And then finally, we're going to be adding the code to our front end to tie everything together and test our app. All right, let's get started. All right, let's log in to our Apple developer account, and then on the main screen, select certificates, IDs, and profiles. And then we're going to go to the identifiers. We're going to add, select app IDs, continue, select the app, continue, and then add a description here, and then enter your bundle ID. And if you don't remember what this is, you can pull up your code in VS Code, and then in the iOS directory, in your Xcode project directory here, there is a project.pbxproj, and there should be a product bundle identifier right here. We will copy this into this bundle ID field here. Then we will scroll down here and select sign in with Apple, continue, register. And then on the back to the identifiers page, here in the app IDs, we're going to select services IDs. We're going to register a service ID, select service IDs, continue. We're going to enter a description and then an identifier, and I just added a SID to the end of this for services ID. Then continue, register, and then go ahead and select this. Select your sign in with Apple. So now here, before we continue, if you have not followed along in the previous video, you'll need to go back and follow along there so that you can set up your project with Amplify authentication before we continue here. So what we'll need from that previous tutorial, let's pull up our code let's pull up our project in VS Code. If you've already set up your project with Amplify's authentication for social providers, then it would have generated a domain in your AWS exports.js file. And here you'll see there is a field domain. We're going to copy this here and then go back to your Apple developer, and then we're going to select sign in with Apple. Okay, we're going to copy and paste that domain right here in domains and subdomains, and then also in the return URL, except here we're going to add HTTPS to / and then paste that domain, and then at the end you'll add Oauth to IDP response. Oops. So make sure you add the HTTPS, and then at the end you're going to add Oauth to IDP response, and that's it. We're going to go ahead and click next. Continue. Go ahead and review this information. Make sure everything looks okay. We're going to save this. Okay, once that's saved, we're going to go to keys. We're going to create a new key. Name your key. And you're going to select sign in with Apple, configure. We're going to select that app ID we created earlier, and we're going to save this. We're going to continue, Then review, make sure everything looks okay, register. Here you want to make sure you take note of this key ID, because after you download or select done here, you'll no longer have access to this. So go ahead and copy and save that somewhere. And then we're going to go ahead and download this. Once that's downloaded, we're going to select done. All right, so that wraps up setting everything up on our Apple developer account. Next, we're going to go ahead and set up our Cognito user pool. All right, let's go ahead and pull up our project again in VS Code, and then go ahead and start a terminal in your project's root directory. And we're going to log into our AWS console. Just type the command amplify auth console, hit return, and we're going to select user pool. And that should bring up your AWS console. And if you are not already logged in, it'll prompt you to log in. All right, so in your user pools, go to Federation, Identity Providers. We're going to select Sign In with Apple. Then you're going to provide Services ID, the team ID that you took a note of, the key ID when you generated the key, upload the downloaded key file, and then select, here you're going to select the user attribute that you set up when you set up your authentication. For me, it was email. If you didn't select email, you selected name, then you would select name. And then once you've done that, go ahead and enable sign in with Apple. All right, once you've saved that, go ahead and select configure attribute mapping. All right, and then select the Apple tab, and then select the fields that you'd like to receive in your Cognito token. I just selected email, first and last name, and then save your changes. Okay, now we're going to go into App Client Settings under App Integration, and make sure you've selected Sign In with Apple under App Client for the web and also App Client for the app. Those two are both selected, and that's all we need to do to integrate our app with Cognito. Okay, we are ready to go ahead and add our button and test our login with Apple on our front end. So pull up your project in VS Code and open your file app.js, and then also start a terminal so we can run our app. And to run our app again, I'm just going to type React Native. Native run iOS. All right, once you have your app running, I'm going to close this terminal for now, or just minimize it. All right, so all we're going to do here is we're just going to add another button right underneath this to test our integration. I'm going to copy this, and I'll just replace Google with login with Apple. Now, we were using a prop from our Oauth with Oauth higher order component for Google sign-in. There's actually no prop for Apple sign-in. So instead of using this with Oauth higher order component prop, we are going to use federated sign-in endpoint on the auth to sign in with Apple. So to do that, I'm going to call auth.federated sign-in, and then we're just going to pass it in a param for provider. And our provider in this case is sign in with Apple. And that should be all we need on the front end code. So let's just go ahead and test that out. So I'm going to click on this. let's see, sign in with Apple. Okay, I see what I did. Here it should be provider. I misspelled that. So let's save that. All right, let's try that again. Okay, if I click on it, it should redirect to an Apple ID login screen. And then here we're just going to go ahead and enter our Apple ID and our password and test this out. Okay, let's try to log in. All right, fantastic. Now I can select continue and it should redirect us back to our app. Okay. And there you go. We are signed in. It's displaying sign out because we are actually signed into our app. If I sign out, it should go back to our sign in page. All right, that wraps it up for logging in with Apple. In the next tutorial, I'm going to go over React navigation. We'll add some tab navigation in the bottom for iOS, and we'll clean this up a bit and add our resources for our images for logging in with Apple and also logging in with Google. All right, if you guys like these tutorials, click the subscribe button and we'll see you in the next tutorial.